today we have Dan Kershaw, who will be leading our agenda for today, and I'll let him go ahead and introduce what we're talking about.
Hello, thank you very much, Dana. Welcome everyone. For those of you on the West Coast, welcome bright and early. I'm going to be leading staff today. I'm Dan Kershaw. I'm a program manager on Microsoft Graph, and today I'm going to give folks a brief Microsoft Graph intro. For those of you who are already very familiar with Microsoft Graph, it's a good time to step out for 5 minutes and go get a coffee. For the rest of you, maybe you'll learn something new. We have Sarah today who's going to talk to us about security APIs, and we have Nilesh introducing a couple of new things, one around fetching graph data in Excel and PowerBI, something I've heard a lot of enterprise admins asking about, so I'm excited to see that, and also an intro to the VS Connector service. I'm going to be giving a very brief update on extensions and a call for help, and then Yina's going to go over a build overview. So here are your motley crew of speakers today and presenter today, and let's chime straight into the overview. Again, if you already know stuff about Microsoft Graph, now's a good time to go get a coffee. First of all, I wanted to say, hey, one of the new elements that are part of Microsoft Graph that were recently released that Sarah will be talking about shortly is the whole security APIs. But Microsoft Graph is a unified REST API and a comprehensive developer experience that integrates with the data and intelligence that's exposed by a range of Microsoft services. And this all sits behind a single endpoint graph.microsoft.com. So as you can see, a whole boatload of different services are available through this endpoint, and the API provides developers with a consistent experience, allowing them to integrate with productivity services like SharePoint, OneDrive, and Outlook, or manage your identities and devices using Azure Active Directory and Intune as part of EMS, or create a bunch of applications that could target schools and universities. And on top of this, it all works if you're building an application for work, school, or personal use, and again through that single endpoint. So here you can see a series of different API calls that you could make to Microsoft Graph for very typical operations centered around the signed in user or other users or groups in your organization. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit around the URL path structure for calling the Microsoft Graph API. So to start with, we've got the root call or root service, and as a REST API, the HTTP verbs in the request determine the intent. So for example, if I'm doing a post, that in general is creating new resources within Microsoft Graph, delete or remove. So the next thing in the URL space is a version. Today we have two versions, beta, which is our preview, and our GA version, which is v1.0. And the next piece we have is the actual resource in general that you want to gain access to. So here we have a variety of different resources that you can access. And then those resources, in effect, are collections or entity sets. And from there, I can pick a particular member of that collection, in this case, Dan. And I can also pick a particular property that is on Dan. I can traverse between related resources, so I can get Dan's events, or maybe I can get Dan's groups that he is a member of. And finally, I can use a series of query parameters to get various different results. So, for example, I could use $select to get a projection on the data that's coming back, or I could filter to control what sort of results I'm going to get back in my page collection. So here we have the basic URL path for calling Microsoft Graph, and we try and keep this a pretty consistent experience for developers. So that's my very brief intro into Microsoft Graph. I'm now going to turn it over to our focus topics, and Sarah is going to take over here to talk about the security APIs that are part of Microsoft Graph.
Great, thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining today. Really excited to share some new capabilities that were announced via the security API. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right in. I want to start by talking about some of the unique integration challenges that face security developers. So if we think about organizations today, they're using dozens of different security tools and capabilities to effectively triage and investigate and respond to threats. And this includes things like threat protection solutions, which monitor and alert on malicious activity. This can include workflow tools that they use to manage incidents and alerts that are flowing into their system, and specialized tools like threat intelligence systems that are used to provide additional context for hunting and investigation. So connecting all of these solutions presents some challenges. Today, many of them are working in silos, and that's because each solution has different alert schemas. It's very, very challenging to consolidate and correlate alerts across these different systems. And every time an organization goes to deploy a new solution, they're sort of starting from scratch in terms of integrating with existing tools and workflows. So a lot of additional work is required there. Each of these solutions also has its own view into the context or sort of a different contextual view. So for example, a threat protection solution like Azure Security Center understands information about the alert, the underlying activity that was generating or was triggering that alert, but that information again is often siloed. And sometimes the context that's needed for comprehensive investigation lives outside of these security solutions altogether. It's information about a user or their devices. And that can be incredibly useful when investigating threats, but can be very time consuming to go and collect from these various solutions. And then finally, there's some operational complexity that's involved. Some of these solutions, particularly those that are not security specific, and a security analyst may not even have access, direct access to that data. So when they need to gather additional information for investigation purposes or to take action to respond to a threat, enforcing a policy or blocking a firewall, let's say, they have to do that in these various systems, which they may or may not have access to. So lots of challenges, and really, let's say some opportunities in terms of integrating these solutions to streamline operations and to increase the effectiveness of our security tool set. So a couple of weeks ago, we launched the public preview of Security API for Microsoft Graph. And there are three main capabilities that it lights up. First is the ability to unify and standardize alert management. So we talked about this as a challenge before. All of these alerts coming in from various sources and various schemas. So now you can write code once to get alerts from any graph supported security solution, and that'll be returned in a common alert schema. You also have the ability to keep alert status in sync. So not only can you pull data from the graph, but you can push back updates to alerts, for example, to make sure that all of your systems are aware that a particular alert, let's say, has been closed or is being worked by a particular analyst. The other is the ability to unlock that security context. So you have the ability to reverse alerts and related entities like users and hosts and applications. You can drill down deep into security profiles. And again, these are aggregated across solutions. You make one request to via the security API to tell me, hey, return all of the security profiles for this particular user or host or app, and it'll aggregate those and return them back. And then because it is part of Microsoft Graph, you also have access to all of this other organizational context from Microsoft Graph providers, Identity, Intune, Office, and others. And then finally, lighting up the ability to automate SecOps, so enabling a single integration point to call runbooks for investigation and remediation. You could use this to automate security policy checks, or enforce policy rules, or orchestrate actions. I think I mentioned before, such as blocking an IP address or resetting a user's password. So let's take a quick look at how the security API will fit with the Microsoft Graph. So unlike other graph entities, the security federates queries for data from multiple security providers, depending on what you have licensed. The data never leaves your environment. The Security Graph API really serves as a broker between all of the Microsoft security products and other security ecosystem partners who listen for queries from the Graph API. So one important distinction is that not only does the Security API provide access or federate queries to Microsoft security technologies, but it also enables ecosystem partners to contribute as peers with Microsoft products and services. This is a bit unique for Graph. I think we're the only API that provides access to third-party systems as well. We think that's really vital as, again, as I said, organizations are using dozens of different security technologies within their security operations centers, and being able to connect all of those is a really vital part of the value prop. So because the graph is authenticated to your domain through AAD, only people with the proper permissions can get access to get responses or take actions on your security data via the API. It lives alongside the other graph services, bringing alerts, security profiles. This is the security inventory that providers identify in your environment, and our automation entities for taking action and managing configuration. Now, these entities can be called along with other Microsoft Graph entities like users or groups to provide that rich security insight and context, establishing new data relationships to enhance and expedite investigation. And all of this will be accessible through the same rich developer ecosystem of the Microsoft Graph, spanning multiple SDKs and code samples. So what can you do with the Security API? First, you can integrate alerts into custom Security Operations Center dashboards, along with other contextual information about those related entities, which I talked about a moment ago, to really enrich the tool set that enterprise SOC operators or analysts are using on a day-to-day basis. You can also more effectively manage alerts in your ticketing or IT management system, keeping alert status in sync across systems, automating common tasks. So if you think about security information and event management systems or IT ticketing systems, ServiceNow would be a good example of one of those. And there are a host of specialized security tools that manage incident response, assignments, and status, and those sort of things. So certainly integrating these insights into those tools can provide value. Also, threat protection solutions. I mentioned some of those earlier, those tools that are monitoring and blocking or alerting or taking action on potentially malicious activity. Because they have access to this richer set of alert data and related contextual information, they can use that to inform their approach to detections. They can, for example, increase the fidelity of something that they're alerting on or taking action against because they see other related activity or other contextual information that raises the severity or the fidelity level of one of their own alerts. So by correlating this data, they can improve the detection capabilities that are built into their solutions. And they can more easily take action, blocking an IP, running an A/B scanning, blocking a user, those sorts of things. And we think there are lots of other applications for this as well, and other opportunities to add security functionality to non-security applications. So if you think about human resources or financial or healthcare apps or many, many others that would benefit from this additional security insight and context. So it'll be interesting, we think, over the coming months to see how non-security applications make use of the security API as well. And just to give you a couple examples of some partners that have integrated via the security API already, PricewaterhouseCoopers is using alerts and context from the graph in their secure terrain offer or solution to deliver improved visibility. Anomaly, which is has a threat intelligence platform, is aggregating alerts from Microsoft Graph and correlating them with their own threat intelligence to enable more rapid investigation. Palo Alto Networks is combining alerts via Microsoft Graph with their own threat data, not only threat intelligence, but data from their network appliances, their firewalls. So correlating and enriching alerts with that data to enable better protection, better detection and protection. So let's take a quick look at the demo. We'll pop over and see that. Okay, so we're looking at a sample application, which this code is available for you to download as well. Probably clear to this audience, but just to be super crisp, the security API is an API. It is a programmatic interface. There is no UI. It's not a dashboard. It's not a, it is not a SOC analyst experience. But this is just designed to give you an example of some of the things you can do with the security API when you integrate that into your own applications. So a couple of things we can do here. First is we can get that aggregated view of alerts across all of the available providers. And we can do that by saying, hey, I want the top 1 or 5, 10 alerts from all of the providers. We can apply a number of filters. So we could say, I want to look at only malware type alerts, or I want to look at only new alerts, or I want to filter down to just a particular provider severity. I can also filter by username or host name, but we'll start by just getting the top 1 alert from all of the providers. There we go. And so you can see it's returning an aggregated list of security alerts from all of the different providers. So here we have Active Directory, Identity Protection, Azure Security Center, Defender ATP, Intune, and even some from partners. So here we've got an alert that's being generated by a Palo Alto firewall and Azure Information Protection. And so we can see the query, STK query and REST query here. When we click on all of these, any of these, it will return the full JSON blog with all of the details. Now I mentioned being able to get additional context from the Microsoft Graph. And so we'll look at that in an example here. So this particular alert was related to this user, and so we can get some additional context about this person, their role, their manager contact, even where they're physically located if we needed, the analyst needed to go and touch their computer, for example, or take some other action. Information about what user or what devices are registered to that user. So not only do they get the alert detail, in this common schema, but also can easily access that additional context. They can also, as we mentioned, update the alert status to keep that in sync across their systems. So we can provide feedback, hey, we've investigated this, it was a true positive and it's been resolved. We could add some comments and we can update that alert. That's going to patch that back via the security API to update the alert details with that additional information or revised information. We can also subscribe and listen to alert notifications. So we can say, hey, I want to, listen for any new alerts coming from the security center that are high severity. And we can subscribe to that and listen for any updates there. So quickly, we'll just pop over to see how some of our partners have integrated with the security API. So what we're looking at here is the anomaly threat intelligence platform. And so an analyst using this solution may, for example, want to see the top hosts that are being impacted by threats. And it's using data from the security API to inform that. So here we can see that there are 3 related alerts that are being generated by Security Center that are triggering that are resulting in this asset being flagged as high risk. And we see some additional context about this particular host, the host name, IP address, operating system, information about who is the owner of this asset, and much more. Again, that contextual information that can be useful to inform investigation. And then within the anomaly experience, we can pivot to find out more about a particular attack. We can see in this case that a malicious communication to a malicious IP was detected. It's a misspelling of a legitimate logistics company. We see it was associated with a malware attack. We can pivot to see all of the other entities that were related to this attack. And then we can do one. And then in theory, we could do one more pivot to look at all alerts that are related to all of the impacted devices. And so here, again, we would benefit, or Anomaly's benefiting from that aggregated list of security alerts from the security API. And then one other quick example we'll look at before we wrap here is the Palo Alto example. So here again, they're pulling in this aggregated list of alerts, and what they're doing is correlating those alerts with their threat intelligence, that's their autofocus solution, and tagging the alert with the related threat intelligence. So this information now is being patched back, so anyone who has knowledge of this alert can get this additional information. We can see, what IP address this is associated with, information about the known attacker. We can enrich that also with panorama firewall logs in much the same way, and we can take action to block this IP address in all of the Palo Alto firewalls. So just a couple of examples of how our partners are leveraging the security API today. So just a quick note about the roadmap. So we launched a week or so ago the public preview. So that's a beta of the security API is now available in Microsoft Graph. We have code samples for C# and Python. And today that supports alerts from Azure Security Center, Azure Active Directory Identity Protection, and coming soon will be Intune and Azure Information Protection. Also, we didn't talk much about this, but there's also a unified SIEM integration that's available through Azure Monitor, which enables near real-time streaming of alerts. It's more of a high volume stream. And that supports SIEM vendors like QRadar, Splunk, Sumo Logic, and Azure Logic apps. And there's documentation developer forums available today, both on Tech Community and tags available on Stack Overflow. And then we're moving toward general availability in the second half of this calendar year, where we will onboard additional Microsoft and partner products. We will light up the security inventory, actions and configurations, expand the set of documentation that we have available, including a provider SDK, and make additional client SDKs and sample code available as well. So wanted to just leave you with a list of resources to get started, documentation on the API and also the SIEM integration, code samples, and community. So I heard a lot of questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. That was awesome. Fantastic demos. Yes, we have a number of questions for you. Starting with Martina, who wants to know, does this kind of compete with CAS?
No, absolutely not. So the idea is to help to more easily integrate the security technologies like CAS that you have in place within your organization. So it is not at all intended to replace any of that functionality. But let's say your CAS solution provided some insight into potentially malicious user activity. It'd be great to have the seamless way to integrate that alert and the related context about that user or the activity that triggered that CAS alert with other solutions that could benefit from that. Maybe you want to integrate that into your ticketing or incident response workflow systems. Or maybe you want to share those insights with other solutions that could benefit from that alert. So the idea really is to make it easier to integrate the technologies that you have, but definitely not to compete. It's not doing any monitor. The API is not going to monitor and alert on activity that's not already being surfaced within your suite of technology, of security technologies.
It looks like Martina was also asking whether Azure ATP would be a provider into the security API.
Yes, we're working with all of the advanced threat protection services, Windows, Office, and Azure to onboard them.
Okay. And I'm not
so
sure.
There were also a couple questions a little bit earlier above. Dan wanted to know what team supports this API.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. So that's my team. We're part of the Cloud and Enterprise Security Group. Yes, so that's us.
Okay, and then Mahesh had asked, does the security API include the operations, for example, creating, managing policies in the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center?
It does not today, we're working with Office to define which configurations they'll expose through the security API, so which policies they'll make accessible there, but not currently. Okay.
And then Russell had asked if a copy of the demo app would be available.
Yes, it is available. There's a sample code for the demo app in both C# and Python.
Okay, so is that right there on your getting started page under the code, those two links?
It is.
Okay, great. I think, will Windows Defender, did we get this question? Will Windows Defender ATP also report into Security Graph?
Yes, that's the plan, to onboard all of the Microsoft security technologies, the ATPs, Microsoft Cloud App Security, and some others.
Okay. Is there anything else? I think we're good for a moment. And the slide deck will be available through the blog post afterwards. So all of these links plus the rest of the presentation links will be available through that, and there will be a copy of the deck. So you can get all of these links from there. There was a question around timing for WDATP and Azure ATP 2. The answer will be soon.
Okay. We're targeting the fall around the GA timeframe, but yeah, the timeline is still a bit preliminary as we work through the details. But that's what we're shooting for, is fall.
Okay, and the blog, we will post it on Twitter and get an announcement out there for you guys. And so with that, I think we'll hold some of these questions more until the end, and then we can have some of the other presenters get their content to you guys. So Dan, do you want to take over again? Who's next? There we go. Nilesh.
Yeah, hi everyone. Just let me set up my system.
Sounds good. Oh, yeah, so Dan's lost audio. Nilesh is getting set up.
All right.
There we go. Yep,
Are you able to
perfect.
see my screen?
Yes.
All right. First of all, let me start by thanking Yina. So the idea behind fetching the data in Excel and Power BI is to provide the users a non-programming access, because Microsoft Graph gives us a lot of insights and a lot of data from Office 365 and other Azure offerings. So when you have the data using Power BI and Excel, there are many people uh, or many programmers on office administrators or person like those who are working day in and day out on Excel. So who those people can have the Excel data in Excel, and then they can work on this. Uh, for the connection, we have to use the OData field. So Microsoft Graph API supports the OData version 4.0. So any tool or any product which can which can consume the OData and which can authenticate against the graph endpoint can have this data. And we have also the query editor using which we can format the data in the way we want. So let me first show you how we get the data in Excel. When you open any new Excel file, you can go to the data menu. Here in the get data, you can see under other data sources, you can see the OData field. So I want to fetch, I have a sample account and I want to fetch the data over here. The idea is that consider you have an organization who has multiple office locations and they are all using Office 365. So all users data is in Office 365, and now you have an office administrator or a receptionist uh, or a PA or anyone who wants the data of all the users, and for them you don't need to write a whole program and publish it to an Azure and authentication, use authentication to the user. Instead of that, you can simply fetch your data using OData field. So any query on your graph can simply be consumed into the Excel. So let us see we get how we get the list of all users. So I'm simply firing this query in Microsoft Graph Explorer. I'm copying the URL and I'm pasting it over here. It asks for the authentication and we have to choose the organization account and click here on sign in. I'm signing in with my sample account. I'm clicking on connect. And here you see the data from my sample account has been loaded with the display name and job title and everything. So whatever you see in the Graph Explorer, the same data now is loaded into the Excel. I can click on load, or I can, if it is some other data, like the usage reports from the office usage report, then you can load into a pivot table or something. But I'm just simply loading into as a table over here. Now I have all the data I want, and from here simply, this is Excel, you can choose or delete the columns from here, or you can click on the query editor and click on edit. It opens the query editor. Here you can choose the columns, which columns you want. Let's say I want to display name. Department. Let's go with these three for the time being. I'm modifying the query and the data is loaded. So this solves a very simple requirement of end users or the office users who are non-programmers, you can hand over simply them this copy, or you can show them simply how to fetch the data, and they will have this data. And let's say there are any changes right now. I have used all my sample account licenses, so I cannot add. But let's say afterwards this data changes, then you can go here and right click and refresh. It will load the latest copy from whatever is a result from Office 365. So this is the simple most example in Microsoft Excel. Let me show you the same way in Power BI. This is the Power BI desktop, which is a free version available from Power BI. You can go and download. It is free of cost. I'm closing it and I'm clicking here on get data. It's the simple same feed, same dialog as you get in the Excel. If you click on here in other, you get the O data feed. And I'm selecting the same users list again. I'm clicking on load. So your data is loaded here. You have to decide which visualization you want to show the user. I am simply clicking a table one, but there are so many others. Consider the case wherein your usage reports, you are getting the usage by user, that on the OneDrive allocated is 5 GB and how many percentage or how much is used. You can show that as a pie chart too. But the demo of today is just to give an idea how you can fetch the data. Here I am selecting again the display name and department and mail. And now you see here the report as a table or a list. This one you can modify afterwards by edit queries. I suggest you to filter the data before on Microsoft Graph URL instead of doing it here. Otherwise, what will happen? It will fetch all the data and then it's going to filter here. Let's say you have made some visualization. This is a very simple case I have shown you. But let's say you have given some visualization or some pie chart or something, and then you can use the publish. When you click on publish, you require another account with Power BI, and you can share it with the users. So this is a very simple case of how you can fetch the data of Office 365 using Microsoft Graph API in Excel and Power BI. That's the demo I have shown you.
Thanks for that, Nilesh. A couple of things I wanted to ask on that. Folks on the call, are there other scenarios that you can think of that you would be interested in seeing through Excel and Power BI? I certainly could imagine that an administrator would want a report of all the people who are licensed for particular subscriptions to, let's say, Office, or are enabled for particular things, or have signed into the system. But are there other reports that people can think of that folks would be interested in?
Just now, as we see, I'm sorry, was the question for me?
I'm kind of trying to ask the group whether there are other things they'd be interested in seeing. Okay, that's cool. One of the things I wanted to point out was I'm not sure whether what you were showing, Nilesh, will work for some of the other things. So I think Joe is saying visualizing SharePoint lists. I don't know whether Excel will be or Power BI will be able to be configured to talk to that part of Microsoft Graph due to having the right permission being granted to Excel to be able to call that that API in Microsoft Graph. I think by default Excel is given some permission that enables it to call the directory portions of Microsoft Graph. But that is something we're definitely working on alleviating, so that you should be able to use Excel and Power BI to talk to other elements of Microsoft Graph, albeit ones that do have OData support. Okay. Nilesh, did you want to carry on into your second demo?
Yes.
Thank you very much for that. That was great.
Thanks. So now let me show you the Visual Studio Connector service for Microsoft Graph. First of all, what is that? When you want to start programming with Microsoft Graph, you have your own project. You may have your ASP.NET Web project or Windows project or console app or anything. And there are certain steps you need to do before you can write your first line of code in Microsoft Graph. So Visual Studio Connector service or connected service allows you to do all the steps. That means it does all the steps behind the scene for you, like registering your application on app registration portal, or you can see that the same in Azure AD also, configuring the app permissions. Whenever you are doing the programming, you need to define the permission scopes, that what your program is going to do. If you are going to deal with a mail, or if you are going to deal with the user profile, then these are the permissions you need to give. And when your user logs in into your application, the user will be shown a screen which says that this application requires following permission. Do you consent? Then they log in. Also, you need to get your app ID and key, which is a secret, and you need to configure that into your app config file or web config file, whatever it is. And you have also to use the Microsoft Graph SDK packages. There are two, Microsoft Graph and Microsoft Graph.core, and there is also another for the identity. So these are the three packages you need. So if you can do, of course, these steps manually one by one, but it may take you some time. And if you are going to use the Microsoft Graph Connected service, then it is automatically configured for you using a wizard. So let me simply show you the demo. For that, I'm using Visual Studio 2017 Community Edition. If you want to start programming, this is the free edition for your personal use or for a demo purpose. So this is the Community Edition 2017 of Visual Studio I'm using. Let's create a new project. I'm clicking on Create New Project. Let's create a new web application. Let me name it I'm naming it Graph Monthly Call. Simply I'm taking web forms because there is no programming on ASP.NET side that is involved in this demo. Meanwhile, it's loading. Let me also log into Azure portal so that I can show you when the app is created. I'm logging with my sample account. I'm going here under Azure AD. I'm clicking on app registrations. Click on view all apps, and you see here currently it is empty. Visual Studio may have been loaded by default now. It opens entry screen or welcome screen. Here, if you see in the Visual Studio, the ASP.NET project, web project is created, and you see the connected services. That is the Visual Studio connected services. I am clicking on Add Connected Service. It presents the option, the last option here, Access Office 365 services with Microsoft Graph. I'm clicking on it. It is asking me for a domain, so you have to choose your domain. This is my domain, a sample account. All the domains start with end with .onmicrosoft.com. I'm clicking on that. What you want to do, you want to use an existing one or create a new one. I want to create a new Azure AD application. Clicking on next. Now it is asking me for permissions. So as a programmer, you should be sure that what your program is going to do, so that which type of permission you are going to ask the user. Here I am simply taking the user permission, read user basic profile and full profile, and I am clicking on finish. Step by step, it is the wizard is doing the registration and everything in the background. It opens just the help page. You can ignore that. Now let me show what has been done. This folder has been added, but inside that these are the two files which you can ignore. It's only a link to how to get started. If you go here in packages file, the packages config, you see the Microsoft Graph and Microsoft Graph.core and identity model package already added by this connector. The web config file, you see these are the keys which has been added. So your client ID and client secret has been added, and your name of the domain has been added. And if you go here in the proper references, you will see the Microsoft Graph core, and this DLL being added. I am going to Azure. You see the graph monthly call application which I created from Visual Studio has been created here. Its application ID is 74 something. That's the application ID being configured. The secret you don't see on the screen anywhere in the Azure portal because it's only one time. I'm clicking on settings. I'm clicking on required permissions. It says that you have two required permissions or under delegated permissions in Microsoft Graph. I'm clicking on that. And if you scroll down, you see we requested the user basic profile and user full profile. This has been configured. So step by step, registering your application, configuring your required permissions, configuring your config file for the app ID and key, adding the packages, everything is done. Now this project is ready for you to start, and you can go and write your code in C# or whatever language is of your choice. So this was all from me. And just one more update. As I speak, I got a mail from Microsoft that I am chosen for the Microsoft MVP Award for Office Development. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Nilesh. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, let me request control here. Okay. Quickly, I'm going to go through some work that we're doing on extensions. Just briefly, for folks who don't know what extensions are, this enables developers to add custom properties and custom data to existing graph resources. So say, for example, you have a user profile, you want to add some user specific profile data, and you want to keep your app lightweight. You can store that additional data on a user resource within Microsoft Graph, and so you don't have to store that data in your app. Alternatively, maybe your app has a very rich profile that it already stores and is able to replicate worldwide to give good performance for all users who sign in. And in this case, what you want to be able to do is join that rich profile data that you store in your app with users inside of Microsoft Graph through a join key by adding your unique identifier to the user profile in Microsoft Graph. So we offer a couple of mechanisms to do this. One is called open extensions. You can read more information about this here. And open extensions is a pretty simple way to add untyped data to a particular or a specific resource, and you can just basically dump a JSON blob onto a resource. The other mechanism we have is called schema extensions. In this mechanism, what you do is up front you define the extension properties that you want to add to some target resources, and you can define what types those properties are. And once you've got your definition, you can then use that definition to actually extend those target resources in a typed fashion. So, and you can read more about those here with some examples. We haven't really done any major updates to extensions recently, and we're actually at a point where we're trying to plan some new capabilities for extensions. And this is kind of an appeal for getting some of your help. So I wanted to start out by asking a few questions to the forum here. Have you tried out Graph Open or schema extensions? And if you can just answer with numbers.
We have a 5-5 yes, 2-5 4 3 2
Okay.
3. Kind of all over
I can
the
see.
board.
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
I can see them.
Okay.
Okay, so it looks like some people are interested but haven't tried it. Others have tried various elements of these things. Okay, great. For those of you who have tried them, did they solve the problems that you had around adding custom data? So I have a series of choices for you here. So hold on, let me say. Okay, I just realized I should have put a marker in place. Oops. I should have put a marker in place for that question on custom extensions. All right, so now that we've answered that one, and then yes, I'm going to be having a separate session. Hopefully folks, looks like folks do want to participate in that. Okay, so we'll send out some additional notification. That might be on a different call that we do around Identity Developer Platform, or it could be at another one of these. But we'll get that arranged because we don't really have time to go in deep here. But thanks for the interest. Okay, I guess over to Yina. Yina, do you just want me to push the next slide for you?
Yep, I think that's good if you can just. So I wanted just to do a quick
let me interrupt for just a second.
What?
Let me interrupt for just a second. Wes had a question for Dan.
Oh, sorry. Thanks. I don't know if we. I guess Wes, I'm not sure what you're nervous about. Maybe we can talk a little bit offline about this. I don't see why you don't think it's a good thing to store data in the longer term, but we can certainly talk offline. Awesome. Are you going to be at Build, Wes? Okay. Well, we'll catch up offline.
Well, following up on that, if you're not going to be at Build, definitely don't miss the live stream. It is going to be on dev.microsoft.com/event/build. And obviously the keynotes are going to be on the live stream, a whole bunch of Channel 9 interviews as usual, and a whole bunch of sessions. So don't miss it. If you're here, we'll like to connect with you. We actually have a lot of things on deck for Microsoft Graph. I know Wes is going to be watching very closely to see how many graph mentions do we have across the 2 keynotes. I can share that on day 2, we're going to have a portion dedicated to Microsoft Graph in the keynote, so I'm pretty excited about that. And there's over 20 sessions on Microsoft Graph, ranging from Microsoft 365 development to the security APIs that you saw today from Sarah, to Windows development, and more and more things that are coming into the Graph. So whether it is through the live stream or afterwards in Channel 9, don't miss those sessions. There's also, we've recorded 24 short videos on all of the different set of APIs that have new things to announce for the build timeframe. We have videos on extensibility. We have videos on Outlook, Planner, OneNote. We have videos on SharePoint, OneDrive, the security APIs, the Windows activity feed, the device, cross-device experiences. There's a lot of things coming in for next week. So definitely don't miss it, and support us also on Twitter. Help us amplify the message so that we can reach new developers that don't yet know about the Graph and all of the cool things that it has to offer. So that was my pitch, and I think we can go to questions now.
I have a question for you. Is there a way for them to discover those 20 sessions that you mentioned?
Yes, there's a way. So if you go to the build website, dev.microsoft.com/build, you can, even if you're not participating, you can RSVP for the live event, like live stream, and then you will be able to see the session catalog. You can filter all of the sessions by the ones that are tagged with Microsoft Graph. So you can actually see them. And then, shortly after the conference, I think a few of them are going to be shown in the live stream. And then shortly after the conference, we're going to have all of the video recordings posted on Channel 9. Great. Any other question?
Sorry, I'll keep asking questions since nobody else is. And booth staffing, we have booths and are looking forward to meeting anybody that is there. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So if you're going to be at Build, come and meet us at the booth. We're going to have actually great presence this year, and we'll, just come in, say hi. If there's questions, comments, and things like that, we're going to have a whole bunch of people from our team at the booth waiting to have those conversations. So absolutely.
Hey, Yina, there's another question. There's lots of interesting features in beta. Customers are hesitating to use them because they do not know when they go GA. Is there an effort to make GA of beta more clear?
That's a great question. We actually made some analysis on the data on how many, what is the timeline of APIs that we have from beta going into GA. We are definitely taking into account that, and we want to make sure that we have a good cadence between APIs going from beta to GA. We don't have a great answer right now. We have a few of them that are kind of laggers and have been there for a while. But definitely the velocity that we've seen recently from APIs that, big set of APIs that are going in to preview, from preview to GA is quite increasing. So yeah, we're definitely looking into it.
Okay, and then there was one more comment around that. How does the PG team monitor the beta endpoint performance? It's been slow lately compared with a month or so ago.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I'll just say, reach out to us over email, msgraphpm@microsoft.com, and then we can definitely look at that. And then if you post questions on Stack Overflow, just always remember to put in the timestamp and the correlation ID so that we can do the investigations on our side.
And And it's also good to indicate what your expectation is. Slow is a spectrum, right? So.
Right. On specific requests, on certain requests, there are some of them are more compute intensive on our side. So yeah. Okay, it's 9 a.m. and we still haven't gotten to our community contributions. We're just gonna blast the screen out there. Thank you so much to all of you that participate actively in the community, helping us amplify the message. We just couldn't do it without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all of the work you do. And we didn't get time for a Q&A this week, so I guess we continue the conversation over our common channels, Stack Overflow and then Twitter and things like that. Or if you want to reach out to us directly, the email is on the IM window. And then our next our next call is going to be on June 5th, and can wait to talk to you about all of the cool stuff that happened at Build then. Thank you, guys.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.